All right, so I wanted to make a quick pit stop. I did this in the first session of this series because I had some people email me explicitly about what is mean absolute deviation. But I wanted to just rehash this because I do think for 6th grade teachers, this is going to be a content enhancement for the vast majority of them, which is code for they're going to have to learn this themselves before they teach it. So mean absolute deviation is simply a measure of how far each data set is from its mean, which we do in other statistical analyses in greater grade level, higher grade levels. But we start that foundation here. And so mean absolute deviation is a kind of a precursor to other deviations that we're, familiar with, like standard deviation. So they'll get to that in high school. So our job in middle school is to start the process. So, and technically, the specific definition is that it's the distance of the data set from its mean. Oh, wow. So there's averages and averages going on and means going on and all kind of good stuff. So I listed a simple procedure here that you can follow to find it. So the first thing you have to do is find the mean, which is one of our standards, one of the measures of center. But then what you do is you find how far each data point is from the mean. And you take the absolute value because you're just interested in how far, not whether it's above or below the mean. And then you take all of those absolute value answers and you average them. So what that is, that tells you kind of a rough measure of spread without taking into some other considerations that they'll do in future grade levels. And there's actually, I listed a link here for YouTube that is a step-by-step example of how to do a mean absolute deviation problem. So what's nice is, if we think about just simply what it is called, it actually helps. It's a very good way for kids to remember how to do it. It's the mean absolute deviation. So it's the average of how far I am from the mean. So an absolute helps them remember absolute value. Deviation is a concept you're going to help them understand as far as how far things lie from the mean. So this is kind of a quick little pit stop here. And I already talked about the last question on here, which is why are we doing mean absolute deviation? So I'll leave that for now. If you have any questions, you can send me a message and we'll talk more about it in detail. So, but that is definitely a new content piece for 6th grade. So let's look at a 6th grade task or two and kind of see what the standard writers mean when they talk about kids understanding these probability and statistics kind of concepts. So this is a task that is tagged to the first standard for 6th grade. And the reason I picked this is that you can probably find plenty of stuff already on those more procedure-based standards. But I picked this task to help you see kind of a way that you can assess and help develop students' understanding of that major concept, that they need to understand what it means to have a question that has variability. So it gives a scenario about Zeke collecting buttons and asks which of the following questions are statistical in nature. That means, which one has answers that could vary. And so the children can go through these 8 questions and discuss which ones not variable, do and do not contain variability, rather. I hesitate to use the word variable because of, the algebraic idea of that, which is another, major concept. But it is the same in the sense that we're asking about things that change. So, or things that have more than one possibility. And so, we could think about questions with variability in terms of, which questions have many possible answers depending upon the situation. And kind of compare that to an algebraic situation where, if you have a variable in an equation, if it's not equal to something, it could mean many things, kind of thing. So And when functions, you can substitute in many different values for the variable. So you can kind of make that kind of technical vocabulary connection there. And then the last thing, part B of this task is one that asks the student to write another statistical question related to his button collection. Now, as you look at this task, a couple things come to mind. You could easily assign a homework problem where you have kids go home and look at things in their household and which ones have, statistical questions involved, or have them design an experiment that's statistical versus experiment that is not statistical. You could scaffold this particular task simply by having, giving out certain questions to certain kids, giving kids 2 questions, one that's statistical in nature, one that's not, and have them sort them, pick which one is which. So there's a variety of things to make this a rich task for students. Now the other task that I included then, I actually attached to the email that went out that notified everyone of this webinar. And that's the Electoral College task. And that's a task that has students look at the data that distributes, the number of Electoral College votes that each state has, and then summarize that data and draw some conclusions. And I'm not going to go through that task in detail today just because of our time constraints, because we have a whole lot to get through for 7th and 8th grade. But that task in particular, a whole lot of good kind of engagement, as well as levels of mathematics going on in terms of, you could assign some kids to summarize the data, you could assign others to draw some conclusions, different there. So I just want to draw your attention. It was attached to the slides message that went out. The other thing to note when you look at that task is to look at the commentary from the standard writers too about kind of the meaningfulness of that task and what you would expect from 6th graders. Now, as we have talked about in the past, with some of these students, you're going to have to definitely scaffold these tasks in order to help them make their way through it. But the thing to always keep in mind is that your goal is that by the end of 6th grade, they would be able to tackle one of these tasks with some level of success. And that's, something to think about then. How do we do some building blocks in between the time to build up to that? So, if I can get this to advance. There we go. All right, so then one more 6th grade task, which is kind of a simpler presentation of the some statistical analyses, and that is a presentation of birth weights of puppies. And what's most important about this task is that the idea of using an appropriate graph to summarize the birth weight, so the students have to make then their choice. I would add to this question, to this prompt number 1, I would say, describe why you chose your graph to summarize a certain kind of graph, or describe why you didn't choose a different kind of graph, so that they have a reason that they did what they did. And then they go through the procedural part of the distribution, but then they get to this last one, which is, so what's a typical weight for puppies born at this kennel in the last 6 months? So are you going to use the mean? You're going to use the median? You're going to use the max? Explain why you choose this value. So if I was to be someone who was thinking about whether or not my puppies should be born at this kennel, what would I expect to be a reasonable birth weight for my Labrador Retriever puppy? So that kind of gives you a simple real-world example of what the students can then be expected to do with the data. And, this would be a great culminating task at the end of your statistics unit because it kind of brings all of those things into play. Okay.